The sun was dipping low behind the horizon, casting a burnt orange glow over the manicured lawns and perfect little houses of Willow Creek Estates. You could almost forget there was any real life beneath the pristine lawns and picket fences, except when Karen came around. She wasn't just any HOA board member. Karen was the HOA Karen. Sharp, loud, always policing, always on the hunt for infractions, and worst of all, utterly convinced she was untouchable. She'd spent years building her own little empire, handing out fines like confetti, turning neighbors into nervous wrecks. I had tried to stay out of her way. I always paid my HOA fees, kept my lawn trimmed, and avoided the neighborhood drama like the plague. But that night, everything changed. That night, Karen didn't just threaten me with a citation, she crashed into my life, literally. I was sitting in my living room, nursing a beer, when the first crash came, not the sound of a distant argument or the usual rattle of kids on skateboards, but a grinding, crushing noise, the kind that rips through wood, glass, and the very foundation of a home. The house shook, the floorboards groaned, and my heart jumped into my throat. I bolted to the front window and froze. There was Karen's SUV smashed through my front fence, one tire teetering on the cracked concrete porch, the metal bumper embedded deep into my living room wall. And Karen herself sat inside, wide-eyed and panicked, hands trembling on the wheel like she'd just realized the world wasn't hers to command after all. I didn't think. I just ran outside, cursing under my breath. "Karen, what the hell? Are you okay?" But she barely looked at me. Her gaze flicked over the wreckage, then back to me with a thin, brittle smile. "I'm fine," she said, voice tight. "This is your fault." My fault? Because she decided to run a red light while texting her latest HOA threat email? Because she thought my mailbox looked unsightly last week? I opened my mouth to yell, but she cut me off. "You'll pay for this," Karen hissed, stepping out with that haughty glare. "And if you think this will go unnoticed, you're wrong. I'm on the board. I know the law." I stared at her like she was mad, which she was. The damage was extensive. Shattered drywall, broken beams, water pipes leaking behind the wall. It was going to cost tens of thousands, maybe more. And I had no doubt Karen would try to wiggle out of responsibility like she always did. But I'm no pushover. I'm not the guy who just pays up and shrugs. No, this was personal now. This was a war. The next morning, while Karen was probably polishing her power suit and rehearsing how to spin the accident into poor homeowner negligence, I was meeting with a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, but a no-nonsense woman named Maya, who specialized in HOA messes and personal injury claims. She looked me in the eye and said, "We don't just get you compensation. We make her pay 3 times over. She's going to regret the day she ever turned her wheels against you." Her confidence was contagious. We started building the case. First, the undeniable fact that Karen was driving distracted and reckless. Then, evidence that she ignored the HOA's own safety guidelines, ironically those she helped enforce. Most importantly, Maya explained how the law allowed me to seek triple damages because this wasn't just an accident. It was negligence, driven by malice, arrogance, and reckless disregard. I gathered my neighbors. At first, they were hesitant. Everyone knew Karen's claws ran deep, and most were too scared to speak out. But then, stories started pouring in. Complaints about unfair fines, threats, and even harassment from Karen. I realized Karen's destruction of my home was more than an accident. It was the climax of years of bullying. Together, we started documenting everything. Photographs of damage, recorded conversations, even some surveillance footage from a neighbor's security camera that caught Karen's car speeding right before the crash. It was damning. Karen responded by trying to intimidate me. She left threatening letters, called the HOA board meetings to smear my name, and even tried to have the police warn me about causing community disruption. But I had Maya on my side, and I refused to back down. Weeks passed. The house was a disaster zone. Every day I came home from work to more broken walls and another estimate for repairs. Yet the fire inside me only grew hotter. This wasn't just about fixing my house. It was about taking down Karen's reign of terror.
Then came the moment the neighborhood watched with bated breath. The HOA board meeting, where Karen tried to dismiss the whole accident as a minor incident and insisted I was somehow responsible for provoking her reckless driving by leaving a note about her parking violations. I stood up. For once, the quiet guy was ready to roar. I played the video footage on the projector, the shaky, grainy clip that showed her speeding, texting, ignoring red lights. I read the collected complaints from neighbors, the letters, the reports. The room grew heavy, silence thick enough to choke on. Karen's smug mask cracked. She sputtered, tried to regain control, but the tide had turned. Even some of her closest allies looked away. The truth was a weapon sharper than any fine or eviction threat. That night, back at my damaged home, I allowed myself a small, grim smile. Karen might have thought she'd crushed me, my house, my peace, my dignity. But what she didn't count on was my resolve. She was about to owe me 3 times the damage, and I was going to make sure every penny was a reminder that bullying and arrogance come with a price. The real battle was just beginning. Karen's world began to unravel in slow, brutal detail. The HOA meetings turned into a spectacle, with neighbors who once cowered under her gaze, now stepping forward, emboldened by the truth laid bare. Each testimony peeled back the layers of her tyranny, the baseless fines, the late-night letters demanding compliance, the whispered threats to those who dared oppose her. She tried every dirty trick. Leveraging her connections on the board, she attempted to bury the lawsuit under mountains of paperwork and delay tactics. She sent legal threats so blistering that most people would have folded before the first court date. But I had Maya, and with her, a quiet army of people who'd been pushed to the edge. The court date came like a storm. Karen arrived dressed like she was heading to war, heels clicking, face made up with that forced smile that never quite reached her eyes. I met her there, calm but fierce, with the stacks of evidence and testimony that turned the tables. The judge listened, not just to the facts, but to the pattern of behavior. Karen's reckless driving, her history of bullying, and the damage to my home that went far beyond a simple accident. The law was clear on triple damages